Try to remember the earliest moment of your life. Go on, reach as far back as you can. You probably land somewhere around age 3 or 4. Maybe a birthday, maybe a fall off a bike. Before that, there is nothing, just fog. Most people assume this is because nothing important happened before then. But the real answer is far stranger. You were not an empty vessel as a baby. You were awake. You were learning language, faces, danger, comfort, an entire model of the world, at a speed you will never match again. And yet almost none of it survived. Scientists have a name for this gap. They call it infantile amnesia. And for over a century, nobody could fully explain it. Sigmund Freud was the first to give the phenomenon its name. Back in the early 1900s, he guessed it was repression, your mind burying early memories because they were too emotionally charged to keep. It was a compelling story. It was also wrong. Here is what actually happens inside a baby's brain, and why it changes the way you should think about your own missing years. Start with the basics. Memory is not one single skill. It is several systems working together, and they do not all come online at the same time. Babies can remember things. That part is not in question. A 6-month-old can recognize their mother's face months later. A 9-month-old can imitate an action they saw once, days earlier. This is called implicit memory, the kind that shapes habits, fears, and instincts without ever needing words attached to it. What babies cannot do yet is something more specific. They cannot form what researchers call autobiographical memory, the kind where you place yourself inside a scene, at a certain time, in a certain place, as the main character of your own story. Psychologist Patricia Bauer, who has spent decades at Emory University studying how memory develops in early childhood, has shown that this narrative kind of memory depends on brain structures that are still under construction in infancy. Specifically, the hippocampus, the part of your brain responsible for stitching moments into a timeline you can later revisit. Here is the twist. The hippocampus is not offline in babies. It is active. It is just busy doing something else. In 2014, researchers Paul Franklin and Sheena Jocelyn at the University of Toronto ran an experiment on mice that helped explain what that something else actually is. Young mice, it turns out, produce new brain cells in the hippocampus at an extraordinary rate. This process is called neurogenesis. Franklin and Jocelyn found that this flood of new neurons does something surprising. It does not just add new memories. It appears to overwrite and destabilize the memory circuits that are already there. The brain is rebuilding its own filing system so fast that old files keep getting erased in the process. Human infants go through the same neurogenesis surge. Your brain, in its first years of life, was not failing to save memories. It was too busy renovating the building to keep the archive intact. Does that make you feel a little different about your missing years? It should. You were not blank. You were under construction. But neurogenesis is not the whole story. There is a second piece, and this one has nothing to do with biology. It has to do with language. Carol Peterson, a memory researcher at Memorial University of Newfoundland, has spent years studying how children talk about their own past. Her work found something remarkable. Children do not just remember events. They remember events better when someone helps them talk about those events using words. A parent who says, "Remember when we went to the beach and the wave knocked you over?" is not just recalling a memory. They are helping build the scaffolding that memory will live on. Peterson's research suggests that kids raised by parents who talk elaborately about shared past experiences develop earlier and richer autobiographical memories than kids who are not. This means your earliest memories were not simply recorded and later played back. They were partly constructed, together, in conversation, after the fact. Think about that for a second. The story of your childhood that you carry around was not filmed, it was co-written. So by roughly age 3 or 4, two things had to line up. Your hippocampus had to slow its frantic rebuilding enough to let memories stick. And you needed language sophisticated enough to encode an experience into something narratable, something with a beginning, a middle, and an end. Before that point, you were a person having thousands of real experiences, forming real emotional patterns, learning real lessons about safety and trust in the people around you. None of it vanished completely. It just went somewhere words cannot reach. This is why certain smells or sounds can trigger a wave of unexplainable feeling with no attached memory. That is implicit memory surfacing without its narrative partner. The feeling is real. The story just was never written down. Here is where it gets stranger still. Some researchers now believe infantile amnesia is not a bug in the system at all. It might be a feature. A developing brain that kept every early memory intact would be carrying an enormous, chaotic archive of half-formed impressions, formed before it even understood cause and effect. Wiping the narrative slate clean while keeping the emotional and behavioral lessons intact may actually be the more efficient design. You get to keep the wisdom without hauling around the raw footage. In a strange way, forgetting your first 3 years might be exactly what allowed you to become someone capable of remembering anything at all. Now think about your own life today. You still do this, just less dramatically. Learn a new skill, a new job, a new relationship, and your brain reorganizes itself around it. Old, less relevant memories fade a little to make room. You are not the same rigid archive you imagine yourself to be. You are still, quietly, under construction. So the next time someone asks about your earliest memory and you draw a blank, you are not missing something broken. You are looking at proof that your brain once cared more about becoming than about remembering. Try to remember the earliest moment of your life. This time, you already know why you can't.